Once you're finished with your collage, you're going to come over to the table by the sink and you're going to get some materials. The first thing you'll want to do is grab a piece of newspaper. Then from the table you're going to grab a cup of Mod Podge. And you're also going to pick out a brush to use. Now keep in mind these aren't our best brushes. Please get them from the Mod Podge brushes only bucket. And you'll notice there's a bucket of water to soak them in after you rinse them out. Mod Podge is a glue, so if you don't get it washed out of the brush, it will glue the bristles together. So we don't want to use our good paint brushes to apply the Mod Podge. So again, you'll get a piece of newspaper, a container of Mod Podge, and one of the Mod Podge brushes. Alright, so once you get back to your table, you're going to put your newspaper down and you're going to work on top of your newspaper. So set your sketchbook down on top of your newspaper. You want to make sure that you don't get any Mod Podge on the tabletop, because when the Mod Podge dries on the table, it's very hard to clean off. You're going to take your brush. Now make sure your brush is clean. Sometimes the paint doesn't get washed out of these and then you end up with paint all over your paper, so you might rinse it under the sink and then dry it out real well before you start Mod Podging with it. You don't want a lot of water in the paintbrush because it can cause some issues as you start to seal. So I'm going to take and dip my brush in the Mod Podge, and I'm just going to start to dab it onto my cover. Now what I have found is if we take and apply it like this in a dabbing motion, the colors tend to smear less. Now if you take and brush it like you would with a paintbrush, that's when we tend to see more smearing of the colors. You're going to cover the entire sketchbook with Mod Podge, the entire front cover. If you get a lot of Mod Podge in one spot, so this here, this is too much. We just want to do a light layer of white. So if you have too much in one area, just dip your brush and use your brush to move it and cover the front of your sketchbook. Now here's something that I want to point out to you. This one was drawn using Crayola markers instead of Sharpie permanent markers. You want to be careful if you have anything that you use regular markers for. When you Mod Podge, it can smear, and you can kind of see that a little bit there. So what you might do is just Mod Podge around the edge instead of just going over the top of it. Same thing if you printed out any images at home with an inkjet printer, those can sometimes smear as well. So you'll just want to go around the edge very carefully of that. Now if you use Sharpie, like for our nameplates, you should have no problem covering that with Mod Podge. So again, you're going to cover the whole thing. Now if you have some pictures that might be peeling up, you can take and put a little Mod Podge underneath, push the picture back down, and then Mod Podge over the top, and that'll help hold it in place. Again, you want a nice thin layer. It'll look white at first, but then once it dries, that's when it'll turn shiny and clear. And the whole point of using Mod Podge is to help seal our pictures, to protect them, and also to help so when you turn your sketchbook in throughout the semester that your pictures don't peel off of your sketchbook. Once you are finished, you're going to do the following things to clean up. You're going to put your lid back on the Mod Podge container. You're going to take your paintbrush and your sketchbook over to by the sinks. You're going to throw away your newspaper. If you got any Mod Podge on it whatsoever, we want to throw it away. If it's clean, you could put it back in the newspaper bin, but if it has any Mod Podge on it, it'll stick to whoever goes to use it next. It'll stick to their work, so we don't want that to happen. Now that I'm done Mod Podging, I'm going to rinse the brush out really well. I don't want to see any white remaining. And sometimes it sticks to the bristles a little bit, so if you're not sure if you got it clean enough, you can always let it soak in the bucket of water here, but make sure when you go to use the paintbrushes that you dry them from here for the Mod Podge. You're going to put your container Mod Podge back in the tote tray at the table, and then you're going to take your sketchbook, bring it over to one of the drying racks. Now to keep it from falling through, you need to set it so that it goes this way on the drying rack. If you set it this way, sometimes they can get in between the rungs and fall through, so we want it to go this way, horizontally on the drying rack, and then you'll leave it there to dry, and you'll go work on a drawing.